This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 107 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking all about travelling with teenagers, so just looking at how to take trips and holidays with teens. It's something I haven't had to do yet. I got to travel as a teenager myself and I have some very fond memories of that, but given that my son is 8, I can see that the teenage years are fast approaching. They'll be here in the blink of an eye, so I thought it was a good chance now to chat with a few people who know more than me. Now, apologies in advance for my raspy, croaky voice here. This episode is totally brought to you by winter. I've been waiting for a couple of days to try and record with a better voice and without gale force winds noisily outside my window, and I've given up. So this is as good as it gets this week it's probably our 1 week of winter down here in Perth. We don't really have much winter, so we're complaining a lot because it's our version of horrible. It's really not that bad. I know, I've lived in much worse winters in other parts of the world, but we still like to complain. Anyway, back to trips and holidays with teenagers, and my first guest is Erin Gustafson, and she should know because she has 3 teenagers. Her eldest is now 17. And I started off by asking Erin for some tips for my future, knowing that she was a very good person to ask about this.
You still have a few years left where they're kind of compliant and interested in the same things that you would be interested in.
Right.
So the tween years, maybe 9, 10 and into 12, they're still pretty interested, but they have they're getting ideas of what they would like to do. Mm-hmm. But I think that they also in the tween years, they have a more perspective. So they start kind of offering what their response to a place is different than a younger child, and they have enough accumulative experience that they're comparing now. They're offering insights, and I think it's so interesting that suddenly it's kind of like this. There's a whole another layer of your child that you get to expose with, and I've had some. I would highly recommend. I've done some one-on-one trips with my kids when they were tweens, and it's just, I think it's a super magical time. Now, moving into teen years, it gets a little bit more complicated.
Right. Tell me
not
more.
Bad. I think not. I really
not
think
bad.
Not
just
bad.
Different.
No.
Okay.
Different, and you have to engage them in all aspects of the travel. No long gone are the days where we're doing this and and you're along for the ride.
Right.
And what they are interested in is probably not going to be what you're interested in. So you have to strike a balance. And I do that even before we even get on a plane or get in the car or get on a train.
Even in the planning process.
You have to engage them from the start. So we'll do it at the dinner table or have a kind of throw out wish list of like, what do we want to, here's the times when we have opportunities to travel this year. What are the kind of places that you want to see? And then give them an idea of budget. So is this the big trip? Is this a weekend trip? Is this just a city break where we don't want to fly? And because the wish list can get very grandiose,
I can imagine. Yes. And with 3 kids who all have their own ideas, then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Thailand, and we live in Europe. So yes, someday I would love to see Thailand, but we're giving them an idea of how big or how small and kind of this is without being we're spending this X number of, kroner, X number of euros, X number of dollars, like a scale, kind of what the scale of what we're looking for. And then everybody gets to kind of contribute and you kind of look at those. We can look up pictures. We can talk about who's gone there. And so that's the fun kind of brainstorming, but it has to be as a group and kind of as with everybody's contributions. Some get struck right off. I don't know why, but nobody is interested whatsoever in going to Portugal. And I
really
have it high on my list.
Me too.
And I keep it. I don't know why. It's just not a taker in our house.
Oh, interesting. How funny.
Yeah. So, and then, so once the place is decided, tickets have been bought, then you need to kind of engage them to just look up what is there on their own, because teens are on the internet. They know how to use the internet. They've got a phone in their hand. Look it up. Follow somebody's Instagram. Look up the Snapchat stories, whatever. But find out what's there that you're interested in, because I know what I'm interested in, but not being a mind reader.
Or a teenager anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I need you to engage in this. And then, so they will come with some ideas. I will give my ideas, and then we have to strike a balance. Like, we are going to go to an art museum, but what would you like to do? These kind of things. Everybody wanted to do the bobsleddings in Latvia, so that one was a win for everybody.
Yeah.
But you have to balance, and then it's like even a balance on each day. So if we go in to see this church, then we will do what you want to do. Is key, and then it's basics. Keeping them fed. Nobody likes hangry, and hangry teens are really bad.
Right. Yes.
So keeping them fed and making sure that their blood sugars keep keep the hormones in check.
Right. Yes.
And then working with their right. No, it's okay. It's really like you just kind of get at working with their biorhythms. So my teens are notorious night owls and sleep late. Yeah. So instead of getting frustrated with that, my husband and I will go out and get coffee on our own and kind of have steal some time in the morning, take a look at where we are, and then come back with breakfast or treats for them, and then we can start. Not planning a 9 a.m. tour of the Colosseum, which is probably not going to well. Nobody's going to be happy, and they won't get anything out of it. So working with that and being aware, maybe you do have an early riser, but mine definitely aren't. So working with that, keeping them involved. And then I know there's a lot of parents who are really frustrated with their kids' use of tech, but when you're traveling, I think that you can use it to your advantage. I think that if you engage them in it, make them download the map and use it offline on Google, and they give them the metro station and have them find where we want to go here. There's an app for every public metro around the world that you can so if they want to use their phone, make them use it for something that assists the family in the travel.
That's a great idea, and they're probably better and faster at it than we are.
Right.
I hate to say this because I'm proud of myself as a high tech user, but I've seen my son. He's only 8, and he's like boom boom boom. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. It's so frustrating. But
they
why not?
also have a little bit of ownership, right? So they aren't just following. They get to kind of be a leader, even though you may have guided them into where they're leading. But I feel like they get to engage. And then we always have a time of the day where it's downtime. I think it's super important, especially teens need space to be teens, and it can't be family time 24/7. They need some space to chat with their friends or post whatever picture they want. And so we give them that, not that hours and hours, but they have it. There's a downtime, and it's okay. And
they can do what they like. And
and there's nothing planned or scheduled. And then we can reset and start again. And so that seems to work for us. I think whatever works best in everybody's family, but I think engaging them, making sure they're fed, working with their biorhythms, letting them help, and giving them space are all super key.
Yeah, it sounds very sensible to me, and in a couple of years I will remember your advice and try very hard to follow it. So Erin has a pile of awesome tips for travelling with teenagers, especially a bunch of them. I think it sounds to me like she does a marvellous job of keeping them happy. You might remember her story from their recent trip to Latvia when they all got kind of lost. They got off on the train on too early and had a kind of adventure through the snow to get to this tobogganing place in Latvia. And despite that, she managed to keep these 3 teenagers pretty much happy, which is, I think, a huge feat. Anyway, my next guest today is Tamara Gruber, and she has just the one child like me, so I feel like it was also very useful to talk to her, because a bunch of teens is probably different to one, and her daughter is just in her early teens, and I was interested to hear what kind of tips she had about travelling with teens.
I feel like if you do start before they're teens, it's a lot easier because they're already kind of accustomed to what you do when you travel. Whereas I talk to some people that have teens and they're like, oh, well, now that they're a teen, we're going to take them to Europe. We're going to do this kind of thing. But then the teen is complaining because they don't want to be away from their friends and they're rolling their eyes about museums. And so I feel like, no, start them younger, get them used to it and get them to love it, earlier. And then it actually is a lot easier. But for me, it's all about like incorporating. It's really the same as when they're young. It's about incorporating the things that they like into a trip too. So if they're very adventurous, plan an active trip, plan something, where you're going to be doing some, adventurous activities, whether it's like an adventure course or whitewater rafting or rock climbing, so things like that. Or if they're really into, a particular type of food, sometimes with a road trip, you could look at, let's try to find like, oh, this is your favorite show. Let's try to find all the restaurants that have been featured on that show and, try to create a theme around it. Or just, if they're very into art, they're very into music, just, make sure that one of those elements is included in your itinerary and then, having them be involved in creating the itinerary. To me, it's not that different from traveling with younger kids. I think the real difference is that they do have a harder time breaking away from, friends or activities and commitments. So trying to find the time to travel with them, to me, that's the bigger challenge.
Yeah, I can already foresee that. Like at the moment, my son, he's 8. His teacher loves me taking him out of school to travel. Don't tell the principal, but, the teacher is very happy. He's not missing anything in school that he can't make up easily. But yeah, for a start, that becomes an issue as they're, in high school. Then I can't just take him out all the time. And you're right. Even already I see sometimes he's like, oh, we get home from a trip and like that very afternoon, I have to go and see my friends. I'm like, God, you're only 8. What is it going to be like when you're a teenager? So, that will be tricky. But I get what you mean about basically making sure the stuff that suits their interests as well, which is kind of, a good rule of thumb, whoever you're traveling with, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, when it comes to picking destinations, we try to make it a family effort, or my daughter and we do a lot of mother-daughter trips. And so we'll talk about that. And, I give her some say in it. You can give them more say as they get older and they start to understand, what the differences are and what type of trips they enjoy. So I've always been an advocate of just involving your kids, but I definitely feel you too on the time. Like my daughter is just going into high school and she is already like, she doesn't want to miss a day of school even when she's sick. So it's not always the school that's dictating it. Yeah. Sometimes it's the kid, because they don't want to get behind in their work. It's a lot to make up,
Yeah, sure. Yeah. When it starts to become more high stakes and more high pressure if you've got a conscientious child, which you want to have a conscientious child, but then it gets in the way of traveling. This is a problem. Do you think that your and her interests overlap, or are they quite different from each other?
I think that she and I overlap in many ways. I mean, we're both like avid readers, and we both enjoy history. We both enjoy food. I think where it diverges is that she is much more adventurous than me. And so I am proud of her for that. And it pushes me to try things. I mean, I've done things that I would not have done if it was just, me and my husband on a trip. So, whether it was outdoor rock climbing. I mean, she went a lot higher and farther than I did, but, I gave it a try because it's also, you want to set an example for your child.
Yeah.
You want to be kind of strong and brave and fearless in some ways, in a smart way, of course. But, so I don't want her to see me chicken out and, not give it a try. If I'm always telling her to just try something, then I have to do it too.
Yes, I completely relate. And I've noticed on my last trip with my son to a Legoland, where must it have been? Oh, in Japan. And so he's always been fairly cautious about, roller coasters and stuff. And he's getting braver. And I'm really terrified of those kind of things. And, I've already pushed myself beyond my usual limits on the, some of the wilder kind of kiddie rides. But thankfully, the really scary one at the Japanese Legoland happened to be closed for the day, because I could see him that he was actually, I think, ready to go on it. And now I'm thinking, what am I going to do next time we do this kind of trip together? Because you're right. You want to set a good example and know, you don't want to say, oh, I'm not going to try, because you don't want them to have the excuse to not do it either. So, yeah, I can see that, the older they get, the more they push you.
This is where I draw the line, though, because I will admit, I am definitely a wimp when it comes to roller coasters. And we've gone together to Universal's in Orlando, and I've done some of their rides, which are not big roller coasters, but more just simulator rides, and it still kind of gets me with the motion sickness. So I'm able to say to her, look, I've tried it, but it really, I don't feel good afterwards. Or, we've gone to water parks where I've tried one slide and I'm like, no, I'm shaking like a leaf. I can't do that again. And so honestly, in that case, what I've learned is bring a friend. And so we bring a friend that loves it, and then I get to hold the bags and wait for them, and she's still happy because she still gets to do it. So
okay, that sounds like an excellent compromise. I must remember that. Some more good tips, and above all, I was happy to hear I am not the only parent who doesn't want to go on all the roller coasters with their kids. I am just not brave enough, I don't think. So we'll see how that goes in the future. Now, my final guest today is Cheri Shanti, and she was actually the one who got me thinking about this whole issue of travelling as a teenager or travelling with teenagers. Because when we chatted, she told me that her first big travel experience was as a teenager, as a 15-year-old, heading out to my lovely country of Australia on exchange. And it was something that really influenced and changed her life. And it was interesting to hear about it.
When I was 15 years old, I don't know what happened, but I got this wild hair that I needed to go to Australia. I was really into surfers at the time. My brother was a surfer and my boyfriend was a surfer. And I grew up in Florida, close to the beach, 5 minutes away. I was always at the beach. So I had this thing for surfers, and one of my favorite surfers was Australian. And so I got this thing where I had to go to Australia, and I found out about foreign exchange programs. I was 15 years old, and I got all the information. And back then, we didn't have internet. We didn't have any of that. So I'm not even sure how I came across it. But I found it, and I was determined that I was going to Australia. And I didn't even talk to my parents. I just got all the paperwork together, and I forged their signatures.
No way.
And then I took it to them. I said, I really want to go to Australia. I found this great exchange program. Of course, I didn't tell them that I'd already signed everything. And I said, I really want to go. And, I really feel passionate about this. I really want to go. And they hummed and hawed and thought that I was crazy, and finally agreed to let me go. And I had an amazing time. I spent 6 months there. So that was my first real solo trip. I was 15 years old, just this little wild child. And my mom always says, you left this little thing and you came back this big girl, because I gained about 25 pounds in your country.
Oh no, I apologize for that.
Well, the food is amazing.
Oh no.
And my family there owned a bakery. So I ate Lemingtons every day. And for the listeners that don't know what Lemingtons are, they're divine. They're a spun, angel food cake, right? Oh, they're the best. And they're dipped in dark chocolate and then rolled in coconut. And because my family made these things. We had just tons of them around. And I worked in the bakery. I actually worked on the weekends. I always worked. And it was just amazing to eat them. So I would just chow down on those things. And then the fresh dairy and the fresh milk. We'd go down to the corner and we'd get our gallon of fresh milk every single day. And so I just fell in love with the food. And it was just such a different quality of food there that I loved it.
Oh, that's interesting to hear, because I always think Australian food, especially as I was growing up, it was kind of bland and boring. But I guess, I can see that. And lamingtons are delicious. I'll give you that.
Oh my God, they're so good. Yeah, I had a great time in Australia. I really, really enjoy your country. It's beautiful. And then I went back. I came back after my exchange, and I was so miserable in the States. I was just so sad, and I missed everyone there so much. Because there too, you'll find one of my common themes in my work and my travel is the community aspects that we really get to experience as travelers, and a different perspective. And I just love the fact that everything was so community oriented in Australia. And you walk down the street, everyone knows your name. It's just very familiar. And I just fell in love with that way of life. Very young.
That's lovely. And I do like that about Australia myself, I have to say. That we sometimes it feels like we're having a lot of superficial conversations, but people are friendly, it's true.
Yeah. So when I came back, I was so distraught that my host family there, because I was in touch with them on the phone. And again, this was, the days before Wi-Fi, the days before cell phones. We didn't have any of that stuff. So it was, on the phone, kind of expensive phone calls. And they actually bought me a ticket to come back. And so when I graduated from high school, I went back to Australia for 2 more months. And I told my mom I was never coming home. I said, I'm going to become a Jillaroo and work on a ranch, because I was riding horses and working on ranches. And I loved it. I was like, I'm just going to become a Jillaroo and work on a ranch and just live my life in Australia and never come back. And she cried and got so upset. You have to come back and go to college. And I didn't have the heart to do it. So I came back.
Oh, your life could have been so different. That was the
beginning of my travel addiction.
Oh, well, I think it's wonderful that your travel addiction began with Australia. That's a lovely story.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh dear. Well, going back to when you were 15 years old and you decided you just really wanted to go to Australia and pursue your love of surfers or whatever. But 15 is a really young age to decide to go to the other side of the world. Were you scared when it came time to actually hop on the plane?
No, I wasn't. Not at all. I've never had a lot of fear about travel. I've always just seen it as such an exciting adventure. I think I had more anxiety about going to the school than I did about going to the country. Starting a new high school at that age. But I was really confident when I was young. I was very just super outgoing. I loved people. And so I really embraced it as an opportunity to just kind of have an adventure and learn something new.
I love that story. I don't know which is my favourite part. The part where Cheri forged her parents' signatures on an application to spend 6 months in Australia, or the part where she ends up living in a bakery and eating lamingtons every day. Lamingtons are so delicious. And anyway, whichever is your favourite part, I love that it really set her up for a lifetime of travel addiction. Partly I had a similar experience. I'd already had the good luck and good fortune of my parents taking me campervanning around Europe when I was 9. But at age 14, I had a month-long trip to Germany with a group of school friends or of people my age, some of them from my school in Germany, because I was studying German in high school. And that definitely, confirmed my travel addiction, I suppose, rather than beginning it. It was an amazing adventure too. I put some photos of it up in the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group the other day. I looked so young back then. It's quite a while ago. But anyway, I think travelling with your teenagers or allowing them to travel without you even, as scary as that sounds to me, I think is definitely a life-changing experience. Being a teenager is a pretty crazy time of life, and if you get the chance during those years to also see how other people live in other places, I think it's probably extra influential. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to episode 107 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. A huge thank you to my guests today. So first up, we listened to my chat with Erin from Oregon Girl Around the World, and you can find her at oregongirlaroundtheworld.com. She's living in Copenhagen at the moment, has interesting stories to tell about that region too. Next, I spoke with Tamara, who comes from the blog We3 Travel. That's 3 the number, so we3travel.com. And she also co-hosts a great podcast called Vacation Mavens. So you can find that in iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts, or at vacationmavens.com. And last but not least, I chatted with Cheri from The Breath of Cuba. So you might remember her from previous episodes. She's had many long experiences in Cuba, is based there part of the time, and has written a book about it, and some really fascinating stuff there. You can find her at thebreathofcuba.com. Don't forget to pop into our Facebook group. Just search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook, or there's a link in the show notes. And all of these links and all the other info, might even throw in a picture of teenage me in Germany, will be in the show notes for this episode, and you can find them at notaballerina.com/107. Thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.